All right, it is 6 o'clock on the 17th of March. I call to order the meeting of the Halifax Finance Committee. Here present at the meeting physically, Cheryl Burke, Frank Johnston, Ed Bryan, Bill Smith, Mike Rignetta, and myself. And on video, we have Mike Bennett, who is on the Zoom call. This meeting is being recorded by Area 58 for later distribution on the Halifax channel. And with that, we can move right into our agenda. Pull that up. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, give me 1 second. So I believe we have a set of minutes out for approval. Has everybody had a chance to review those?
Yes.
Yes. Does anybody have any adds, changes, or deletions to those minutes?
No.
No. You can have a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. So we will do a roll call vote. Cheryl?
Yes.
Mike Bennett?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
EJ?
Yes.
Bill Smith?
Yes.
Mike Rignetta?
Yes.
And I'm a yes also, so the minutes are approved. Thank you all. Back to, and close out that agenda item. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which would be Halifax Elementary School budget. So I would like to start off by saying I appreciate everybody coming in. I know that this discussion has been going on for a while, and sometimes subjects are covered that seem to consistently repeat themselves. However, I think as we are here as representing the residents as part of the Finance Committee, and they are actually our end customer, that's the diligence that I think we're showing is warranted at this point. So I know that the school committee, the Halifax Elementary School Committee met, and they had a reduction in they did some cuts on their own. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren, you're down to about 1.1 where was the last meeting that I watched. Would that be correct, or was there more? Okay.
Because we were at 1.1.
That was the last video meeting that I watched.
Did you watch?
I haven't had an opportunity to look at that.
Yeah, so we cut from I don't even look cut.
Reduced.
Reduced by 449,000.
So it looks like the figure being requested now is $7,648,313, which is $826,175 increase from last year, or a 12.11% in the Halifax elementary budget.
Okay.
7 million what, Cody? I'm sorry.
$7,648,313.
Thank you.
So Lauren, the March 10th presentation is the most recent, correct? Okay.
There's a little gray button at the bottom, and then it should light up. Yep, you're good.
What was the question? Sorry. That was the most recent meeting, March 10th, correct? And that's where we made the additional cuts so that the difference was less. That the increase from last year was less.
You're at 11.4% increase over the current year, correct?
12.11. The figure being used initially from FY25 was inaccurate. So the percentage was off a little bit there.
12.1.
12.11.
11.
Mhm.
Okay, so the tier two reductions are applicable on this?
So what we ended up doing was we have some extra money in our special ed budget that we put somewhat of freeze on to carry over for next year of 200,000. And then there's a retirement that we don't want to fill. And then we also reduced down to three classrooms at 3 of the grades so that we had an additional 210,000 to try to reflect current enrollment. So we didn't necessarily get into the tiers. And then the other thing we did is we decided to gamble on saying that we would not have more than 2 vocational placements, so that we also took that money back.
Okay.
So it was the 200,000 from,
Teachers.
what?
The three teachers.
200, 210, and then I believe it was 9, right? That was what we reduced by.
Okay.
38, okay. Oh, and the REAP grant also that we found out we had.
And so the largest class size with those changes on the teacher count goes up to is 23. If
Correct.
I'm reading this correctly. Yeah.
Which I believe is a current class size. Yeah.
Okay.
So
So there's an elimination of 3 teachers, is that correct?
that's correct.
What grade level is that at?
I have to double check. Do you remember the exact? Hold on.
Yeah.
And that represents that 210,000 in staffing, is that correct?
Sure.
So you had asked about the grade level and which staff would be cut. Please keep in mind that the staff has to be cut by least seniority.
Sure.
And so if a teacher is a 6th grade teacher and we're cutting in the 2nd grade, the 6th grade teacher might shift to 2nd grade if there is a need for that as a classroom teacher.
Yeah, but you know which levels you're cutting at, correct?
Yes. So the grades that we would be cutting at are grade levels 3rd, 4th, and 6th.
3rd, 4th, 6th, 3, 4, 6.
Or we'd go down to 3 classrooms.
And that was the 210,000 in staffing, is that correct?
That's correct.
There's no other staffing cuts, correct?
Not at the moment, no.
And the remaining amounts that you got to hit the reductions that you came up with were from special ed that you're carrying over for next year?
Correct. We have an excess at this point of 400,000. So we decided to freeze 200,000 of it with the hope that it won't be used. And that is something we can carry over in our budget to next year.
So what is the level of confidence that that number will remain available? Because if I remember correctly, at the February meeting, there was a very low level of confidence that those monies would remain at the end of June. So what's changed between February and now to give us more comfort.
Our director of special services said that she felt like that was, we literally used the word gamble, a good gamble to take.
Okay.
She said that unless barring something, and I mean, we all, who looked into it? I can't remember now. Sorry.
She had special ed bookkeeper.
Yeah, she had the special ed bookkeeper confirm.
So nothing that we saw from February to March would cause us to start to grow a concern over that money. Okay,
Correct.
great.
And the reason that we didn't want to cut any additional staff is because we're operating pretty bare bones already. And from actually, because of the cuts from last year to this year, we also lost some $180,000 of grant money that we could have been potentially awarded next year because we didn't meet maintenance of effort. But by cutting this year and holding the circuit breaker funds, we could possibly maintain maintenance of effort better next year because we would automatically be spending more next year. And we also had to pay a higher percentage to Silver Lake, correct? Yeah, because of not meeting minimum threshold. So
So you're protecting the MOE then?
correct.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately we didn't do last year.
Last year, yeah.
Mhm.
Right. Bus situation staying the same this year as last?
Correct. We looked into charging for buses, but only about 150 students would be even eligible to be charged. And then you don't know how many children are in each family. And it felt like we wouldn't be able to offset the costs enough to have it be beneficial. And frankly, we don't want to, I mean, at least from my personal standpoint, I don't want to make it hard for any students to get to school.
What about our contract? We in the last year of the contract with First Student.
But
So we are in year 5 of a 5-year contract, and the contract has 2 option years. And I apologize, I don't have everything up in front of me, but the increase from year 5 into the 6th year option year is either 6 or 7%. It's not a huge number. School districts that have gone out to bid in the past 3 years are seeing things increases in double digits. I had sent an article to the school committee about Dartmouth, Massachusetts, getting a 26% increase in their bus costs.
So you're going to exercise that option?
Yes, both school committees have voted to, I'm sorry, the Silver Lake School Committee and the Joint School Committee have voted to exercise the year 6 option, and there is a year 7 option also.
And First Student's going to grant that option to you?
Yes.
I also wanted to say, as part of the regional study that we're having done, that if we were to fully regionalize, that would also enable us to have, sorry, I forget, like more money funds towards busing. So while we are okay for this year and the next, hopefully, we're trying to look at cost saving options for the future by hopefully fully regionalizing and giving us access. I don't want to call them grants. I don't know. Well, it's like transportation, regional reimbursement. So
Silver Lake High School runs 31 buses around the 3 towns and gets about $775,000 in reimbursement from the state for the buses. So that those same 31 buses do all the bus runs in Halifax, Kingston, and Plimpton. And so that is, you would imagine, another $775,000 left on the table every year because we're not fully regionalized.
What's it cost us to approximately to become regionalized?
that's what we're having the study done for. Halifax was actually awarded the grant to do the study, but
Yes.
when we said no to the MBTA Act, Cody thought quickly and got it transferred over to Kingston. So
right.
that's part of what we're looking at. And hopefully, I don't know that there would actually be any cost to fully regionalizing as much as realizing savings because of the redundancies and things that, you know, for instance, if there's a professional development in Plimpton, we can't just send all of the school teachers there because it's a mess with the budget. So each school is paying to have this professional development done at each, you know, elementary school, where if we're regionalized and, you know, one bill to one system, like that's just one example of redundancy. So I'm hoping that the study will uncover some cost savings, which already with the regional bus transportation, I mean, that's the hope, you know, and that's why they're doing the study, is to show us the possible cost savings. But I can't really think of a place of how expensive. I mean, we already have the grant to study it, and I think implementing it would hopefully reap cost savings. But that's why we're having the study done.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's like a buy-in cost, you know, upfront.
It's just a matter of us changing our regional contract. Like we changed it in order to have the pre-K and 7 through 12 be part of the region, because that's how we were already somewhat operating. So it would just be a matter of changing the actual regional contract or the district.
How does the unions play into that?
I think that's something that the study will look
Yes.
into. So it's going to be comprehensive, not just operationally they're going to look at, but also economic impacts, various ways to do it. One of the things we've heard is, you know, Kingston has some large capital needs upcoming. So, you know, why would Halifax and Plimpton want to take those on? So there's things like each community is still responsible for each of the capital. Those are all the things that we're going to look at. But I think it's just too early at this point to impacts.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get an understanding of that, the long-term picture, because we know where the budget's going to be next year again, right? Next couple of years.
Yeah, the study is, you're looking at it probably 18 months for the study to be completed. So it's certainly not something that would be able to be implemented next year, or probably not. I would anticipate the earliest would be fiscal 28, maybe, if everything went great.
So the study's just gotten started, basically.
We haven't even, or Kingston hasn't even chosen a vendor at this point.
Oh, we don't have anything going on.
Nope, there were some interviews going on with vendors. But again, it's Kingston's grant now, so we're working with them to oversee it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the questions I had was, obviously the elementary school reduced their request for this year. And you talk about using some special education funds. Is your request, because the reality is if this request goes through, it's only if an override is passed. Is it sustainable in the future year, at least next year, do you think, given a 3% increase, right? An average percentage increase? Or is it something where we can anticipate larger than that because we need to make up for, let's say, that $200,000 plus other increases?
Well, the 200,000, I don't think will have to be a makeup because it would be money we didn't spend special education. And as far as, and then if we were also able to get the REAP grant back, that would be another, I mean, I can't totally predict that. So we would be a little bit ahead next year. We've certainly asked this question because projecting costs has been challenging. And, something that we're working on is like the chair of the school committee is asking the state to change the Chapter 70, to give more money to the towns because, I mean, we're not the only town in this situation. And, we're doing the best we can with the resources we have. And it's a hard thing to predict. I know we would all love to forecast. I would love to know. I would love to know what next year is going to be because I would like to be able to rest, and like not worry about it because I'm worried about our school. So I mean, we knew this year was going to be tough and, I don't know. I mean, we've asked that question, but I guess I can't really give a great answer, but I don't think we're setting ourselves up at this point to make up for anything next year. I think we're making wise decisions with what we know right now with that special education funding and also making ourselves re-eligible for the REAP grant and things like that.
I'll just add to that from our perspective at Silver Lake. Constructing the budget for next year, we pretty much had to put blinders on and do it for 1 year. If you look out, and that's why there's a $1.2 million E&D expenditure helping to try to obviate the costs. We were fully aware that because of the change in the district and how it was structured, that the individual towns would have kind of fiscal cliffs, if you will, because of the circuit breaker going over to the district, to the big district. The reality is, though, the cost of money is just way up, and the state did not go with it. So, when you talk to Jason Frazier, who is at the top of the MASC organization, who is in with Washington and with the state and things like that, and is probably the best kind of lobbyist, so to speak, on our behalf at any of those organizations, he will tell you that, they were hopeful of lobbying for, 7 and 7% these past 2 years, and thought at worst they would get 3.5%. Last year, they got 1.7, 1.6, something like that. And this year was worse. It was 0.17. And you have a bus contract that goes up 6%. You have health insurance that goes up 8%. You have labor that goes up 5 to 6%. You have special ed that goes up 15% plus. And so, no, that's not sustainable. And none of us are looking at next year or the year after that and thinking if things continue, it will be sustainable. Now, that said, there has been an absolute outcry up to the state legislature about that. Jason personally helped organize a meeting between state legislators and president or school committee chairs. It's one that will be a luncheon that's going to be held over at Alden Park in Plymouth in early April. There's another listening session that's going to be held by Zoom or phone or something like that. So at least there's attention. The problem is kind of what Jason was also saying is the school funding, before it became kind of Chapter 70, was really kind of broken as well. The state worked really hard to fix it. That fixing more or less worked for quite a while, but it took 4 years to get to that point. So some of what we were looking at from a strategic standpoint up at the Silver Lake area was $1,000 comes off of the town debt loads this May, and then another 700 next May. Have I got that right, Sarah? Or is it the following May and the following May? Right. So you do have debt retiring. Now, also that said, if you look in our Safer Committee folders, we had an engineering firm do an analysis of what would need to be fixed for the school. And we have sort of ranges in there that start at something like 3 million and go up to like 50 million. So, obviously I don't think we're all ponying up for 50 million, but those are the types of things that would have to be handled through bonds. But from our perspective, we tried to buy another year without having to do, really extensive, brutal things. We tried to provide, try to at least not make it worse for the towns grappling with their elementary schools. And we're holding on for dear life and hoping for legislation that a lot of us are involved, kind of begging and pleading for.
So Lauren, just to jump to the special ed dollars again, and Gordon, thank you for that. That was helpful to hear. And good to hear that there's engagement from the state side that's happening now that wasn't happening before. So that's great news. So the special ed money carryover, we're putting a freeze on 200,000 of the, what was it, 381? Is that what was?
That's correct.
So if for some reason that has to be touched this year, what is the fallback plan? Because I'm assuming by the time that would come to a reality, the budget would have already gone through and we would have a firm grasp on what we could afford as a town. So what is the fallback plan if that number changes between now and the end of the fiscal year?
We did not necessarily make a fallback plan because we were pretty much felt that it was a pretty good, I mean, I hate to use the word gamble, but I mean, obviously there'd have to be more cuts or reductions. So, but we're hoping, given the forecasting till the end of the year, it is March, that we are going to have that excess.
Yeah, I'm just struggling with the way that that conversation happened in February versus the way it happened in March are very, very different. And that's concerning to me.
No, I can understand where you're coming from. And I mean, we did have the bookkeeper look at it and I don't know exactly what the changes were to have them feel comfortable with that, but it is a month later, which can sometimes just give you more information.
Mm-hmm.
And we certainly didn't expect to have that excess there at this point. So,
Okay.
So do we have, I just have two questions actually. So the first one is, just to go back in the conversation, we said that the Halifax Elementary has to pay for vocational school out of district placements.
Mhm.
that's correct.
That's statute.
Help me understand that.
That is state law, that the sending town to an out-of-district vocational school pays for the tuition and transportation.
Okay. So that doesn't come out of the general town, comes out of the school's budget. Okay.
That's just how it's done here in Halifax. My previous district, it was part of the town budget.
Right. Okay.
Jim, before you go to your second question, what is the deadline for those out of district applications to be in?
The application for the students to the out-of-district vocational schools, the applications are due by March 15th. And the students that are making those applications are required to notify Silver Lake or notify the district by April 1st that they have applied.
Okay. So that too has until April 1st to fluctuate. Okay.
Yes.
So some of what may have helped that is that the vocational spots at Silver Lake year will be entirely within district. So the positive of that is we have a ton of demand within district. We have, I think we actually get more applicants than we can fulfill for our VOTEC program. The downside of that is we are not getting out of district placement dollars from Pembroke or from others. Now, that's probably helping us keep various Halifax kids home, but we're not seeing out of district placement money coming our way from other towns.
So does the district, the administration, the superintendent and their staff, do they have a 3-year, 5-year, like kind of financial plan that predicts? I understand that there's a lot of things that are not in anybody's control. I absolutely understand.
I can answer your question.
Okay.
I started in Silver Lake in November of And in November of 2024, there were some forward-facing things that had to be dealt with, the restructuring of the district and the enormous task of unraveling some improper financial dealings with revolving accounts. And all of that was taken care of between when I started and when the budgets were approved last May. I was straight out the whole time. There are some missing tasks that my severely understaffed office is working to fix. We have an issue from 2016 that we're working on for the auditor who's working with us on our 2024 audit. I want you to know that it's the 2024 audit and it's only 2025, and I'm really proud of that because we finished the 2023 audit not even 6 months ago, and the 2022 audit was January of last year. So
Right.
there's a lot of backward facing things that we're trying to catch up on.
Mhm.
And I understand what it is that you're looking for. And as soon as I have the time and the capacity to do the forward facing
Mhm.
things, that will happen. But
Okay,
until then,
So-
we have a lot of
right,
backward facing things that need to be worked on.
sure.
So a couple of things on that point. The school district, 65% of the expense is straight salary. When you add in benefits, it becomes 79 to 80%. And at times it's been as high as 81 or 82%. So the contracts are, already written for the next, I think the teachers just finished year 1 of 3. So there's another 2 years. And, it's an average of 333. It depends on the year. One's 3.25, one's 2.75 or whatever. And then you have to factor in their step increases. So when they reach certain seniority tenures, then certain people jump up and things like that. And so the net effect of that is an average of somewhere between 5 and 8% a year. So that's known right now, and that's the vast majority of your budget. Normally, the administration can handle that and mitigate it back to below the levy threshold by managing retirements, managing attrition, other things like that, and making technology trade-offs and other things, so on and so forth. But 80% or so of your budget for the next 2 years is fixed within headcount with known increases. I think what is really difficult is that the other things besides are variables that, they feel like they're at the margins, but then they add up quickly. If you don't go up in your state funding, like we just did, you wind up being short. If the state then authorizes special ed to go up by huge amounts, then you end up way short. We have had an increasing number of IEPs. And we can all debate about why that is and why there has been an overall increase of special education services. Certainly the hits that everybody took during the pandemic did not help. But those are difficult things to manage that the administration is aware of, but they have to be very, very careful in how they manage them. So the vast majority is pretty fixed, and it's fairly clear to see. If you want to think about we're just about to start negotiating with paras. We will, next year start negotiations with the teachers again ahead of the final year of their contract. I mean, you could take a look around and ask your attorney and things like that to get an understanding of where teacher and para contracts are landing in terms of overall increases. That's, some of what we do when we do those negotiations is benchmark ourselves against competitive school districts and benchmark ourselves against what's happening in the rest of the state. So that said, the critical variables are state funding, special ed, transport, health insurance, handful of things like that.
What's the percentage that IEPs go up every year? I'm just curious. 1%.
I don't have that information.
Yeah, we have that data in, we have the number of students that are receiving services. I just can't recall it off the top of my head. It's definitely in our annual information that is published on the Silver Lake site. And it has definitely been growing at, say, double-digit percentages. I want to say that the number of students out of Halifax alone is something like 35. I might not be recalling that correctly, but
No, I think, Gordon, I think that's pretty close for the elementary school, 35. Anybody have anything else for the elementary school?
I'm
Yes,
good.
ma'am.
Thank you.
So the percentage of students with disabilities at Halifax Elementary this year is 23.2%. Department of Elementary and Secondary Education maintains what they call school and district profiles,
Mhm.
which has a wealth of data.
Yes.
So I'm looking at 2025 right now. In 2024, there were 20.2% of the school had IEPs. In 2023, 16.6%. So I can send you a link to where you can get this information. There's more information here than anybody would ever.
Yeah, I'm on the DESI site quite often. So, yeah, thank you for that. I think it is a wealth of information and a lot of stuff that you have to decipher a little bit when you start kind of grinding through it.
I think it may be helpful to, if Sarah and Gordon may run us through, so Silver Lake, you're using about 1.2 million of E&D. Halifax, roughly a third, right, of the Silver Lake budget. So about 400,000 off of what our assessment would have been. We're still seeing a 5.6% increase, 455,000. Maybe explain to the committee why that is, the finance committee, just so they understand why Halifax's portion in particular is going up a little more so than Plimpton and Kingston.
So a portion of that is minimum threshold. Your number would have been lower. And I think close to 400,000 of that is because of a failure to meet the state mandated minimum. And hence, 400,000 that really became Halifax. So it was something I think we teased out in the last few days before we had to vote our budget. But if your percentage looks kind of askew compared with a negative percent out of Plimpton and a 1 point something or other percent out of Kingston, I think that's a big part of the reason why. We live in a very tough catch-22. If you don't, you can't just easily cut your way out of it because then you get penalized from the state.
So Cody, this budget that March 10th is assuming an override passes, correct?
You have two budgets in front of you.
Yep.
The one's labeled override, top left, and one's labeled balance.
Yep.
So the override is assuming an override passes, balance is within the constraints of Prop 2.5.
So I'm just curious, and if we have this type of information now, but what we just talked about, how does that change on the school side?
I can tell you one moment.
So just to clarify, Lauren, just so everyone hears it the same way, this now would be the reductions if an override were to not pass.
Correct.
Okay.
But I will note it depends on what the finance committee votes, but what you have in front of you would not require the school to make all of the cuts as anticipated. We went through and made cuts on the general government side as well to try to lessen the burden on the elementary school. So this would be worst case scenario cuts that you're about to hear from Lauren.
Okay.
The reality is in the budget that I'm proposing to you, balanced,
Yep.
if the override doesn't pass, is less cuts for the elementary school than you're about to hear because we took some cuts over to the general government side.
Do you know a percentage of that, Cody? Do you know the percentage of dollar amount that would be taken away from the school side by those reductions that you made on the town side?
Percentage of the overall
Of the school budget?
Oh, no, I don't have that.
No? Okay.
So in the balanced budget without the override, how much of a reduction would we need to do at the school?
Well, the finance committee hasn't voted anything yet.
So you can't share.
I don't, I can only tell you what my recommendation is, but it's, the finance committee hasn't voted anything yet. In the recommended budget, it would be it would give you guys a 3.5% increase from last year.
Okay. So it'd largely be all the tiers that, so if we if we reduce to all of the tiers, I'm trying to see if there's an overall,
So the 1.2 million?
correct, it would start, well, I don't know if this is the easiest way to do it, but if we did another, basically 500,000 in addition to the three teachers, it would be another grade 3 teacher, it would be a grade 3 teacher, a grade 4 teacher, a grade 5 teacher, a grade 6 teacher, the tech teacher, and a special educator. And we put in a bus paid by fees, but we decided not to do that. But, and then if we had to go another 300,000, so that would be a total of about 830,000, would be a math specialist, the reading specialist, which would leave us without math or reading support. And we would also cut library and art, which would leave music and gym. And then if we went to the final tier, it would be one kindergarten teacher, a grade 1 teacher, a grade 3 teacher, a grade 4 teacher, and a grade 6 teacher, which would leave us with 3 teachers at the K level with a class size of 28. 3 teachers at the first grade level with a class size of 27. 2 teachers at, no, wait. It looks, hold on, that doesn't seem right.
Grade 4.
It says in grade 2, there'd still be 4 teachers, but I don't think that's correct.
Well, there was no reduction in
Oh,
this.
there was no reduction in second grade. Okay.
Yeah.
Would be 4 teachers at 23. And then in grades, and I assume the idea is because at lower levels, keeping smaller class sizes is more beneficial than, because of reading and
Mhm.
establishing learning, which grades 3, we would have 2 teachers with 34 students in each class. And at grade 4, we'd have 2 teachers with, again, 34 students in each class. And then in grade 5, it would be 3 teachers with 26 students. And then in grade 6, 2 teachers with 35 students. So you'd have grades 3, 4, and 6 with 30 plus students in the classroom. So,
Two questions, or maybe 3 questions, actually. On tier 2, you have 3, 4, and 6 are all reducing by 1. And if I'm reading the numbers correct, if you jump to tier 4, it would be an additional on top of the one that was previously reduced, correct? Okay. I think my last question is, one bus paid by fees is factored into the 495, 626, but we had talked earlier about sort of that concept was put to the side. So how does that change the 495, 626 reduction on tier 2? $457. So about shy of $50,000. Okay.
One bus is $38,000.
and one thing that's hard is that I don't know that tier 2, well, tier 2 doesn't take into account the 210 we already reduced by, I think, because that was just a suggestion of how we could cut, and see.
The 210 for 3 teachers was one request,
Right.
on the school committee. And the tier 2, 3, 4 was different. So they're separate.
Right. So in some respects, we've already done the 210,000 in tier 2.
Yep.
And that's also a little bit where we padded in case we end up needing that special ed circuit breaker funds. Like if we have to spend it, then it would look like the tier 2 that we would have to. So I don't know if that makes sense.
It does, yeah. No, it
Okay.
does. Thank you.
well, I mean, and there's even the question of whether or not we can even fit 35 students in a classroom at HES. So
Yeah, and tier 4 is where it jumps off the paper. Tier 4 is where class sizes become a concern.
exactly, especially in grades 3. Yeah, the ones with 30 plus. I mean, 27 and 28 for kindergarten and first grade is not good, but at all. That's way so many young students.
Okay, so these numbers speak to the 3.5% increase.
Yes.
Okay.
This is to if an override doesn't pass. Um, and if an override were to not pass and we have another difficult year, we have nowhere to go. And as Cody mentioned, we would be looking at receivership, which would then mean we have no say in how the school is funded. We have to do what it's done. So it's kind of, I feel like with some of the cuts we made last year, we could have preserved grant money if we didn't do, like, I just feel like if we need to obviously be very thoughtful about our education in our town. And I know it's hard for everyone, but our school has been a really shining point of our town. And I know for my own children have excellent educations there. And, I really, as a school committee member, want to keep our school the greatest that we possibly can. But I also understand the challenges of how much of the budget the school takes up. And it's hard because the elementary school, we have to pretty much go with whatever happens at Silver Lake. But it's hard. We want our kids to be as well prepared when they end up at Silver Lake as the other two towns. And I know it's not an ideal situation, and I wish I could say this is it. Like, oh, just give us this, we'll be good. I mean, I really, really hope the state funding changes. But I mean, the thing that concerns me is if in a much worse situation, not even having any control over the decisions that are made in our town because our school went into receivership. Because they will get the funds they want for the school. And I don't, I want to have the other services we have in our town as well. So.
Are our costs in line with other towns with comparable demographics and academic performance?
Actually, I know they've talked a lot about our cost per pupil spending, and Halifax is one of the lowest.
Yeah, but that's all kind of
I know.
relative. Yeah.
It's, I mean, it's hard to tell because like with most towns, you're looking at K through 12 and we're just looking at, I mean, our town is similar in cost per student as Kingston, and they have much larger class sizes. So, it's so our per pupil spending, I mean, I could say yes to Kingston. Plimpton is kind of an outlier.
Right.
But I haven't really looked beyond that. So, but it's some of the only schools that I know are only looking at elementary school too, as far as the cost per pupil. So to compare apples to apples.
Is enrollment down from last year or is it up?
Enrollment has been going down steadily for the last 10 years, which is why I felt like it's been clear that I've said that we should reduce where we can reduce because, class sizes in the low 20s are really wonderful, I think, but we have to also acknowledge what our enrollment is. And if it goes up, we'll face that, but we have to also, be realistic to what our enrollment is. It used to be 600. We're down at about 530 or 540. Do you know? 531. That's what I thought.
Percent across the whole district is about right.
Gone down 10%?
Mhm.
Really? What's that?
Huh?
Yeah.
Talking too much.
No, it's fine.
So, um, I know you guys put a lot of work into this, and I'm only gonna ask this question because I want to understand how you got to some of the decisions that you made here. But specifically on teacher numbers, right? A lot of talk that I've heard amongst the community relates to the specialists and if those were to be reduced. If you go to tier 3 cuts on your spreadsheet, that's where the 2 specialists come in. But then if you jump to tier 4, you still make a reduction on grade 1. What was the, yeah, maybe it was 1. There were two classes where if you were to reduce this additional staff member at that grade level, the number of size of that classroom still would have fallen within that 20 range, right? So is there a reason why, when you were looking at this, why you didn't look to do that before touching a specialist?
Honestly, as a school committee, we vote the total number and the school has line item autonomy. Last year, we voted to do certain reductions and legally they weren't able to do them. So and then they had to make other, they had to do other provisions according to contracts and whatnot. So as a school committee, we are then asked just to give a number with certain reductions reflecting where we think the cuts might be.
Mhm.
And so, and also in the February meeting, the school committee voted not to reduce at all and go for the full override amount. And so that's another thing that, some, differing opinions on the school committee. And, if we could get a little bit where I thought, which ended up being palatable to the committee. But I mean, as far as like specific, can we say to the principal or superintendent, can you do this instead of this? We can say that, but ultimately they have line item autonomy and have to go according to contracts. And from my understanding, that it impacts if you have a certain number of teachers, then it impacts the entire schedule. And there's actually not room for certain specialists in the schedule according to what they're trying to do now. And that's why they make the reduction choices in the way that they do, because it's according to how they deliver education and the teachers have their prep time and other things. So that's my understanding of why the specialists were, which I mean, none of the reductions are ever going to be popular. There's
Right, for sure.
But I understand what you're saying, but also at the end of the day, how it's applied is really up to the administration.
You just need to be able to trust and feel confident that that decision is being made by what's best for the kids.
Exactly. Because I will fully admit, I do not have a degree in education.
Right.
So they're there to advocate for what they think is right. And we are there to try to advocate for what we can do reasonably within the town.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Leonard.
You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, we're all here.
Right. Mike, anything?
I'm good, sir.
Okay. Cheryl? Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate all the work that you guys put into this and the third run at reducing some of the costs. So that's I
Thank
know
you.
it's hard.
A lot of people have been working really hard together. And
Yeah.
honestly, never mind. I just hope we can get a budget passed that's great for our schools
Right.
and the rest of the town.
Thank you for all your efforts.
Yep.
Because it's tough.
It is tough.
The whole committee. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say the school committee worked hard. I mean, we have difference of opinions, but we worked hard to get to
Yep.
hopefully a palatable solution.
I enjoy the at times very vigorous discourse during the school committee meetings.
It's remarkably well put.
It is interesting.
Oh, boy.
Well, why not? Okay, so if there's nothing else for the elementary school, I want to thank everybody for coming in. And we can close out that agenda item on our meeting. So next agenda. No, with the goal at this point, that was something that I had thought about, but it's not on the agenda, so we're not going to vote on these tonight. We'll vote on these probably next Tuesday is my thought before the Board of Selectmen meeting. Is when we'll put our vote in.
Feel free to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Only me.
All right.
Thank you, Sarah.
Good night, everybody. So the next agenda item is the FY26 budget feedback. We'll open that agenda item at this point. Cody has passed out the two budgets that he has diligently worked on. So I guess we'll just take these back, Cody, and go through them. If anybody has any questions for him, which I'm sure somebody will, or at least I will, I'm sure. We'll get him over to Cody before next Monday, and then he can answer everybody. But when you ask him a question, if you could copy the entire finance committee, so we're not just bombarding him with the same question.
Did you mark off where you were making the cuts from? Was it marked off in there? Or?
It's not. No. In the spreadsheets in the shared drive, they're both in there.
Yep.
So a few things that you'll notice. You may recall, we were initially talking about a $1.6 million override. We've been able to get that down to what I anticipate being somewhere in the range of 810,000. A lot of that obviously comes from the Halifax Elementary School making some reductions, but we've gone through and tightened things up significantly. On the general government side, reductions made in both budgets include we have historically funded free cash out of the raise and appropriate, so out of our general revenues. My proposal would be to fund 50,000 of that out of raising and appropriating, and then another 50,000 out of free cash. Now, we've historically only done a $75,000 reserve fund. I'm proposing we move it to 100,000 this year. And the reason being, budgets are tighter than ever that going into this year with reductions. Reserve fund transfers are likely to increase because we're not budgeting for the unexpected anymore. We're budgeting for what we know, and we're really not budgeting for the unknown. So the reserve fund may need to get utilized at a little bit of a higher level going into fiscal 26.
That's 100, did you say 100 or 110?
100,000. The idea would be 50,000 out of our general revenues, raising and appropriating, and then 50,000 out of free cash. And by doing it that way, we're also not creating a fiscal cliff for next year, because if we needed to go back to the full 75 out of our general revenues, you're only talking 25,000. So I think it's a good mix, but while also increasing the reserve fund.
How many dollars do we have in the free cash available?
Before capital, it was
Yes.
1.45 million.
1.45?
Capital did approve right around 1.3 for capital requests.
What did they approve?
I'll be sending that up.
Yeah,
That's part of the
good.
things that
Okay.
we'll cover at the next meeting.
So out of the 1.45, you're looking at 1.3 of that being spent.
And then if we did 50,000, we're pretty much would be using most of our free cash.
The free cash we can't use for anything but capital.
You can, but it's one-time money.
Yeah, you don't
So
want
if you,
Okay.
it's recommended that you never use it
don't use it.
reoccurring
Right,
expenses.
right.
That's part of our financial policies as well. So that's one of the first things we made that freed up some cash. We then went through, reduced the legal budget request. So initially we were looking for 193,000, up quite a bit, given some of our potential litigation. We're also going into a bargaining year, reduce that down to 165,000. It's still a sizable increase from last year, but I think as long as things go okay, we should be able to cover it in there.
Be all right with that amount,
I'm optimistic.
with the MBTA and
Yeah,
everything
with
else.
MBTA, is that gonna,
It's just such an unknown at this point. I think 165 is still a sizable increase.
Okay.
And if something were to happen, we would have to make either a line item transfer at the end of the year or a reserve fund transfer.
Okay,
Yeah, we may not even hear from MBTA till
this year,
FY
maybe.
27 or
Right.
later, who knows?
Right.
We reduced overtime in the building maintenance department budget. We, like I said, Halifax Elementary School reduced their request. Stormwater management, there was a request for $180,000. We reduced that by 80,000 by moving it to the capital plan because about $80,000 of that request actually is for capital related to stormwater management. That freed up $80,000 in the budget. We're level funding our insurance account and using water's contribution towards our annual premium. So that should balance out. We're going to have to increase it next year, but again, to free up some cash for this year, we did that. And then we also reduced gas and oil for all buildings and vehicles. Really just looking at the trends for the past few years and also current economic conditions. At the federal level, we anticipate the price of the cost of fuel to remain somewhat low. Going into the balanced budget, we made several reductions in the general government side of things when it comes to staffing. There would be reductions in staff accounting office, in the building maintenance department, in the library, and the Board of Health. We would also eliminate the sick and vacation buyout item, which is budgeted at $30,000 this year. The result of that would be we would have to take it out of the salary account, so we wouldn't be able to fill the position for an extended period of time because the funds would have to be utilized out of that. If it were to occur at the end of a fiscal year, we would have to do a line item transfer or a reserve fund transfer.
Okay.
And then the last thing we would be doing in the balanced budget is we put in funds to our overlay every year. Our overlays are abatements, exemptions, cases that end up in the appellate tax board. We've been averaging about $180,000 a year into the overlay. I would propose that we reduce that by 85,000 and only contribute 100,000 to that this year. Again, it's not a long-term thing, but we do have a current balance in excess of our overlay of $337,000. Doing this just for a year, we're like that. And so that's what, on top of the additional cuts to the school, which would be in the amount of $587,400, that makes up the balanced budget within the current constraints of. We used our local receipts budget for this year. So if for some reason the state budget results in a proposing to us, we would have to look to make potentially some additional cuts. And our local receipts are budgeted at 90% of last year's actual, which is pretty typical. It's somewhat on the conservative side, but a little more optimistic than we've been in the past. So like I said, we really went through, worked with several departments to cut anywhere possible with as little impact. On the general government side of things, if the override does not pass and these positions are cut, again, there'll certainly be impact. But we did try to make it so it's as minimal as possible on service levels for the community. But there would be some reductions in hours for certain offices, requests that the public make. We're pretty quick with things. Right, it won't be the case with certain things as they come in. But it's I think the best case scenario considering we're trying to preserve our essential services.
Okay, so what's the cost to the taxpayer on average for the override?
$286.30.
Is it?
But obviously that's based on the value of your home.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
according to the DLS website, the average single-family tax bill impact is $286.30 based on an $810,000 override.
What's the average house value on that?
The average single-family assessed value is $511,243. Average family tax bill current is $7,295. So add $286.30 to that.
So that's substantially lower than the number that in our last meeting of $860 something dollars or something. No, it was the 800 number.
We tried to get this down as much as we could. Like when we first started the budget, we were up around $2 million override.
Yeah.
You know, we, like I said, really dug deep here. Some of these things aren't probably, aren't the best financial decisions for the long term, you know, but we're trying to preserve as many services as we can if the override were to not pass.
So. Well, if selectmen go with wanting to put the override on the warrant, we're talking approximately $286,000 per tax household.
$286.
$286, excuse me.
Oh,
Frank,
Let's send the bill
with all the zeros to Frank's house.
So one important thing is the figures that we use as estimates for the impact on the taxpayers is based on current year values because we don't have that information for fiscal 26. We won't have that until we have a budget and then values are all assessed and we set the tax rate sometime in, you know, I think September, we usually set the tax rate, right?
September, yeah.
So the information we have, the best we can do is based on fiscal 25 numbers, which is the current year. I don't anticipate it, you know, drastically changing, but it's likely to be different because the value, you know, values go up and down, tax rate changes. So it's based on all those factors. But the best we can do is provide, you know, if the override were to have happened this year, this is what the impact would have been, which is where that number comes
Right,
from.
but that's the number we have to work with. So next Tuesday, correct? The selectmen will make it on.
So so the finance committee will ultimately need to make recommendations or
Yes.
recommendations on which way to go forward or both ways or whatever it may be. And then the board will make the final decision on whether to move forward with the override and put it before town meeting and the ballot.
Yeah, so it'll go to the town meeting and then it goes to the ballot on a Saturday after the town meeting, correct?
Correct.
And then that'll be the final yay or no.
Right, if it passes at town meeting. So
Correct.
the way that we'll do this likely, if the board moves forward with it, is we will have the balanced budget as our typical Article 4, the budget. And then we'll have an Article 5, which would be a separate appropriation to each of the line items in the amount that would be if the override were to pass.
Up to the 810,000.
So we would designate each of the line items where where reductions were being made. And Article 5 would basically be increasing those line items if the override passes. But if Article 5 does not pass, the vote on Saturday doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, right?
Do we have time enough to get that as a ballot initiative?
If the board, that's why the board
May.
needs to decide. Yeah, that's why the board needs to decide.
Why wouldn't we decide to have it in November?
No, because you have to have a budget before July 1st.
Yeah, you can't.
We have to have
Yeah.
July 1st starts
Right,
the
the
budget.
fiscal year.
We have to have a budget for July 1st.
Okay. Right.
But we won't be deciding at town meeting whether we do an override. It will be a ballot question.
After the town.
So
meeting.
it's two
After
parts.
town
So
meeting.
town meeting has to approve the appropriation,
Right. And then,
subject to the ballot question, and then the ballot question would then have to pass.
and it will be voted on, but all of the citizens,
Can vote.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, both are open to all citizens, all,
Oh, wow.
you know, voting residents.
right.
But yes, it would need to pass through both. The appropriation would need to be made at town meeting, and then the ballot question would have to pass on the ballot.
Okay.
Understood.
Six is palatable.
Much better than the
Much
last
better,
numbers we
yeah.
talked about.
You did a lot of work, Coach. Great job.
Agreed.
Right.
It really is good.
One thing to note too is, and I kind of mentioned it tonight with Silver Lake. I anticipate we're going to have financial challenges again next year, regardless of an override passing or not.
Right.
Because Silver Lake's budget, right? You use $1.2 million of one-time funds, which give or take was $400,000 of what would have been assessed to us. So next year, going into next year, we're looking at a $400,000 increase on top of
Well,
whatever their
whatever
request
else,
is,
right.
right? So
Right.
if their request is 4%, I mean, and you heard Gordon talk about most of their, wages.
Right.
So if their request comes in at 5% next year, we're looking at 5% plus 400,000, which puts us over,
We'd have to do it.
10%.
Right, so we'd have override
Right.
in next year and possibly the year after. Things aren't gonna get any easier,
Unless the state steps up.
and they're not gonna, not right now.
But I do just want to make sure everyone's aware of that, what
Yeah.
we are trying to plan, future plan. And without definitive figures from the school, but we can at least see there's going to be a challenge next year.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's
No doubt.
without any sort of, we don't know what Halifax Elementary will be looking at. We would hope to bring these increases back in line of where they've been historically, which is in that, high twos, low threes. But again, just looking at the outlook of our revenues, anything beyond, 3% is going to be a problem for us.
It is.
Our revenues just aren't growing, 2.5% for our tax levy. And then new growth this year, we're only anticipating $75,000 in new growth. It's the lowest it's been in a long time.
Yeah.
Can't do much with that.
So given the 90%, were you able to pull out about another 150,000 this
Right.
year? But as the economy changes, these are all things we have to consider.
Oh, yeah.
And we think of things like, right, we get a meals tax. Well, are people going to be eating out as much
No.
given the
Right.
economic conditions?
Can't afford it.
So we're confident going into this year by increasing our local receipts, but I'm not so sure we'll be able to do that next year. And, we'll certainly have a little bit more growth next year, but we're limited really by Prop 2.5.
Do we have any idea what they're gonna, what's Stop and Shop building is gonna, any idea? Any takers? I see it says it's for lease or sale.
There's been no interest at this point. Beyond, the big push is obviously housing throughout the state, and it's not currently zoned for something that would make it worthwhile for a developer. So,
Right. Yeah. Mhm. Times are tough all over.
Okay. Anybody have any further questions for Cody?
I want to thank Cody for
Great
the
job.
effort he put in here the last 7 days working on this.
We appreciate it, Cody.
Yeah,
Really
thank you.
do.
Absolutely.
Not easy.
Yeah, and the override average is much, much better than our last meeting,
it is.
which is huge. But it's up to the taxpayers to make their decisions, and Halifax Elementary made a big
They make it up.
change in their numbers as well to help with that.
It did, and I think, in the recommended budget that you all have, it again, it's not significant, but it doesn't make the elementary school cut quite as much if the override doesn't pass as we initially had anticipated.
Right.
The idea was to give education a 3.5% increase at max. That's what our goal was this year. Obviously, Silver Lake ended up taking up more of that than we thought, but by freeing things up as much as we could, we were still able to give Halifax Elementary School a 3.5% increase on top of the 5.6% increase
Right.
to Silver Lake,
Right.
which again, it
And they,
seems much more manageable.
sorry, they make no effort. Sorry.
Okay. Mr. Bennett, any questions?
No, sir.
All righty, very good. So we'll close out that line item on our agenda. We'll move over to any liaison feedback for the Finance Committee.
Heard anything?
We have any at this point in time, so hearing none, we'll close out that line item. We'll move on to public participation. So I know there was a number of people on Zoom. Does anyone on the Zoom call have a question for the Finance Committee or the Town Administrator while we're all here? Okay.
Monitoring, Michael.
Does anybody have their hand raised, Cody, on Zoom? Can you tell?
Let's see. Okay, one moment.
No one has their hands up.
No.
Nobody.
Okay.
Okay.
Said nobody.
All right. Hearing none, we'll close out that line item and we'll move into the next meeting preparation. So next meeting will be on the 25th, which is where we will meet jointly with the Board of Selectmen. And that's what, at 6 o'clock, Cody?
Yes, let me confirm and get back to you though. We may have another,
An executive session?
well, we have so actually the timing works out, but our state representatives are actually coming in at the next
Okay.
meeting. So, Kathy Lenatra and Ken Sweezy. So I think we maybe have them on the agenda right for 6. So the finance committee portion may start at 6:30, but I will confirm
Okay.
and get back to you.
So I would ask if the committee members can come in, a little bit early. And we can meet and vote on the budget. So I was thinking 5:30 if that works. I don't know if you can get here in time, Mike or EJ.
I'll check my calendar.
Okay.
5:30 next Tuesday.
So I think come in at 5:30, it gives us 30 minutes to kind of talk about everything we've listened to over the last couple of weeks. And then vote on the budgets that are in front of us at this point in time. And again, if you have any questions for Cody, please get them over to him before Monday. So we can get our answers and kind of come in knowing which way we want to go. Does that make sense, to everybody?
Very much. On the 25th, Tuesday.
All right.
Both the budget.
So that closes out
Meeting.
the next meeting preparation. So can I have a meeting to adjourn or a motion to adjourn?
So,
So moved.
You roll call vote. Cheryl,
yes.
Mike Bennett,
Yes.
Frank Johnston,
Yes, to adjourn, please.
Ed Bryan,
Yes.
Bill Smith,
Yes.
Mike Brugnetta.
Yes.
I am a yes as well. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks everybody for coming and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you all.